Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Teaching Success podcast. This is episode number 6, titled Your Identity. So, what do I mean by your identity? Well, it's simple. What I mean is how your subconscious mind sees you. Now, in the last episode, we talked about self-sabotage and fear of success, and that was built off of, again, the subconscious mind. We learned how it worked, and then we learned why it sometimes fights us and gets into the self-sabotage. And the reason why it does is we talk about the beliefs, the patterns, and all that stuff, but really it boils down to your subconscious mind will fight you if what you're doing doesn't align with your current identity. And your identity is the sum of your experiences, beliefs, and values that have been imprinted onto your subconscious mind. Again, like we've talked about in previous episodes. But it's your identity that controls your habits, your actions, everything that you do. Again, anything that you do, anything that you don't do, it all comes down to your identity. And anything that's not aligned with your identity, that is where your subconscious mind is going to fight you. So if you don't want to go through self-sabotage, if you don't want to have fear of success, all of these negative things like we've talked about in previous episodes, it's simple. We just need to change your identity. And I know that sounds easier than it actually is, but it's actually not all that difficult once you understand how it works and what the process is to change that. Now, we do have a course coming up where we're going to go through everything that we discussed in this podcast in even greater detail. And a large focus of that is going to be changing your identity. We're going to get really in depth and we're basically going to change who you are to become that new person. When the course is out, I will have links in the description down below. So if you're watching this maybe a couple of months, couple of years later, just check down in the description and see if there's a link to the website, to the course, so that you can join. But if you're not interested in going through formal coaching or anything like that, that's fine. We're still going to get into a lot of detail in this podcast, so please keep listening. And hopefully you can make these changes yourself without going through the formal coaching program. Some people can, the majority of people can't and sometimes need that extra help. Okay, so going back to identity, like I said, identity makes who you are. It controls everything in your life. It controls the actions that you take, the actions that you don't, the beliefs you have, the beliefs that you don't have. Everything can be summed up in your identity. Now, I don't want to talk about politics too much, but what I do want to talk about is how people usually follow a political party because it's part of their identity. It informs who they are, what they believe in. But generally, people don't go through all of the different policies. They don't understand a lot of it, but they still identify as, in the US, for example, either a Democrat or a Republican. And if a party, either or, Republican or Democrats, comes up with a new policy, generally, almost everyone in the party will agree with that policy without that person even thinking the policy through, without going through the pros, the cons, seeing if it's actually something that they even think makes sense or believe in. They don't do any of that. They just follow along with what the party says because, again, it's part of their identity. If you identify as a Republican, you're going to believe certain things, even if it doesn't necessarily make sense. If you're a Democrat, same thing, you're going to believe certain things. And if a policy comes out, almost guaranteed you're going to agree with that, even if it doesn't actually make sense. If you were to sit there logically and think it through, guaranteed there's times where if you were to actually do this, you would say, you know what? I don't agree with this policy. That doesn't actually make sense. But that doesn't normally happen. People stick to their parties. It's who they identify as. And whatever happens, whatever the party decides, whatever the party does, that's what they do. They just blindly follow along because, again, it's their identity. And people are so tied to their identities. And like I said, it dictates everything you do, everything you don't do. So anything that changes that is a threat to oneself. It's a threat to who you are. And that, of course, can become a problem again, a lot of times specifically in politics. But it's not just politics, it's almost every area of your life. Everything around you is your identity. Everything you have, everything you don't have is because of your current identity. And if you want to change things, you need to change what your identity is. You need to change who and how you identify as. And again, that's things that we're going to get to in future episodes. Another example I want to bring up is AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, I think it's a great group. They do a lot of good things to try and help people to overcome addiction, but there's definitely problems with their methodology, with how they see things. And the way that I see it, their biggest problem is when they're trying to help someone quit alcohol, they tell them you're an alcoholic. You cannot have even a drop of alcohol because you're an alcoholic. If you have a drop of alcohol, you're going to relapse. It's going to lead to all of these bad things. And although it's true that that person shouldn't be drinking alcohol because obviously they have a problem with it, what they should be doing, what AA should be doing, or how, at least how I teach it and what I believe, is you need to get those people not to identify as alcoholics who no longer drink, but they now need to identify as just not an alcoholic. Maybe someone who was an alcoholic and has overcome it, but not someone who is still an alcoholic. As long as you see yourself as an alcoholic, you're always going to have a problem. It's something that you're always going to struggle with. And if you look at people going through AA, again, fantastic program, and they do a lot of good things. It doesn't help every single person, but they do have a very high success rate. But those people struggle for the rest of their lives. They have to keep going to AA meetings. They have to keep doing all of these things. And the reason for that is because they teach you right there. They're telling you your identity, who you are is you are an alcoholic. The better way to treat it is to change that identity, to say you are no longer an alcoholic. You are not someone who drinks alcohol. You are not someone who has a problem with alcohol. You're not someone who even thinks about alcohol. Alcohol is just not a part of your life because that's not who you identify as. If you change your identity, for instance, to someone who is super into fitness, that eats super clean, you won't have a cheat meal, eats only the highest quality foods and vegetables and stays away from junk food and processed food, who wouldn't touch alcohol. If you can change your identity to someone like that, even if you were an alcoholic, there's a very good chance that that person is going to stop drinking, that they're no longer going to have a problem with alcohol because it's not going to be in their identity. It's not something they even think about anymore because it's changing who they are at a fundamental level. It's changing their beliefs. It's changing everything about them. And that's how you make change. That's how you actually reach your goals. That's how you get success, is you need to change who you are. And I've talked about this in every single episode, that if you want change, you have to change who you are. And to change who you are, you need to change your identity. You need to change how you identify yourself, how others identify you, and most importantly, how your subconscious mind identifies you. So how do you know what your current identity is? Because in order to change the current identity, you need to know what your current identity is. It's a question I get asked a lot of times, and people are often confused by it and they're really puzzled. But the answer is very simple. If you want to know your identity, look around you. Look around your life, what you have, what you don't have, your relationships with people, your relationship with money, your fitness levels, anything, again, that you're trying to improve on, wherever you are right now in life, that is your current identity. If you're someone that is overweight, your identity is someone that's overweight. If you're someone who's poor, your identity is someone who's poor. If you're someone who's very wealthy, your identity is you're someone who's wealthy. And it doesn't matter what happens, you're always going to come back to that identity. That's why people who are already wealthy tend to stay wealthy. Why people who are overweight, doesn't matter if they go on a bunch of diets and do all of these different things, they usually go back and they gain the weight. Look at someone like Oprah. Oprah is, I believe she's a billionaire worth a couple of $1 billion. She struggled with weight her entire life. Now, this is someone with a lot of money, someone that's on TV, who has the resources to hire anyone and everything that she needs in order to lose weight. She can hire the best personal trainers. She can hire a personal chef, a nutritionist, all of these different things. And Oprah has done well. There's times where she has lost a lot of weight, but she almost always bounces back. She always regains that weight. And again, with someone with that amount of resources, you would think, oh, it's easy. She should be able to lose weight, especially she's been very successful in almost every area of her life. But this is something that she always struggles with. And the reason why is in everything else in her life, she identifies as someone who is successful, who is on TV, who is a superstar, who is all these different things. But her identity, now I obviously don't know her personally, but I can tell you her identity is someone who is either overweight or someone who is constantly trying to lose weight but can never achieve it. And the reason why I'm so certain about that is because, again, just look at her surroundings, look at what she does. So anything and everything in your life is dictated by your identity. Again, everything you have, everything you don't have is all based on your identity. Going back to the food and fitness example, if you look at someone who is extremely fit, super, super lean, just really good shape, chances are they're probably eating well and they avoid junk food, things that are bad for them. Now, a lot of people look at that and think, wow, that must be really hard. Like, how does that a person avoid eating bad? If they're at a party, how do they avoid, not eating the chips or not drinking the pop or doing all of these things? And the answer is it's actually really easy for that person. And I say that because that person identifies as someone who is healthy, someone who is fit, someone who is whatever they are, and they identify as someone who doesn't eat those types of foods, because to eat those types of foods would go against what their identity is. So if you look at these people that are super fit, super in shape year round, I'm not talking about the people that just yo-yo diet and they kind of go back and forth, because their identity is someone that yo-yo diets and goes back and forth. But the people that are fit year round, that have no trouble staying away from bad foods or anything like that, it's because that is their identity. So it's not a struggle for them. It's actually very easy for them to pass on, again, the junk food, the pizza, the chips, whatever. If someone comes up to them and says, hey, do you want a slice of pizza? And they say, no, that's okay. I don't eat pizza. I'm trying to stay lean. To them, they actually get gratification from denying that junk food. Why? Again, because it aligns with their identity. For those people, it's easier to avoid that stuff and maintain their image, to be in alignment with their identity, than it is to eat the junk food. The problem with most people, and especially those that haven't achieved the level of success that they're looking for, is that sometimes what you think your identity is and what your identity actually is are generally two different things. You may think, I'm a healthy person, I eat clean, I go to the gym, I work out. Maybe you go to the gym once a week, maybe you go once a month, maybe you eat clean 2 days, but then you binge on all these different things. Maybe you think you're really good with money and maybe you invest, a couple $100 every month into the stock market, but then maybe you're going and blowing all your money on lottery tickets or other non-useful things. You may think that your identity is whatever your goal is trying to achieve. But again, if you haven't achieved that level of success yet, it's because it is not aligned with your current identity. So today's homework is going to be quite simple. It's going to try and determine what your current identity is. And like I said, it's generally different from what you think it is. So what I want you to do is, you can think about this or write it out on a piece of paper, but write out what you think your current identity is, or the identity that you're trying to go for. And then I want you to actually observe your life. Think about or write down everything around you and determine what your actual identity is. Again, if you think you're healthy, but you're overweight, your identity is not someone who is healthy. If you think you're wealthy, but you look around and you're living paycheck to paycheck, your identity is not someone who is wealthy. So I want you to really think about it. Be honest with yourself. Be critical of yourself. This is going to be tough, and it's hard on some people's egos because again, you're so tied to your identity. But if you really want to make change, you have to change your identity. And to change your identity, you first have to identify what your current identity is. Now, again, we're going to get into how to change that further down the road. That's going to be in future podcast episodes or in even greater detail in the course that's going to be available. But for now, your homework is simply sit back and try and determine what your current identity is.